welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. Today, we are going to get right into it. I feel like we've been getting right into it. I don't usually have a lot of announcements lately. Today I do though. I do have one quick message for you from our sponsor. Thank you to my friends over at Bellesa for not only sponsoring today's video, but they are literally sending out free toys or gift cards towards toys for everybody who signs up to my giveaway through the link in my bio. If you haven't never heard of Bellesa before, they are a bi-woman company whose mission is to empower everybody to embrace, explore, and celebrate their desires. They have something for literally everybody's needs. We all have different like focal points, if you know what I mean. So no matter what that is for you, they have got you covered. My personal fave is the Pebble. It is so cute. It has the suction and vibration controlled independently. It's also ergonomically built to fit perfectly in your hand. As you can see, it is so stinking adorable. There are also no annoying pattern modes, which I like, and their products come in the most discreet casings ever. They're also waterproof and rechargeable, but like literally, you guys, like how cute is this? I always say whenever we work with Bellesa, the first time Big Guy ever saw this, he was like, oh, did you get some new AirPods? Which I thought was so cute. But seriously, like look at how cute. This looks like a sunglass case, like a beautiful little sunglass case. And to me, I think packaging is so important, and it just like goes to show like the effort and the care that Bellesa puts into their products. Do not miss out on your chance to get in on this giveaway. Like I said, there is free toys or gift cards towards toys for everybody who signs up through the link in my bio. Thank you again so much to Bellesa for taking care of me and for also being a continued supporter of my channel. I've said it so many times, but I truly could not do what I do without the support of my sponsors and without you guys supporting them as well. So thank you, everybody. It really means so much to me to be able to do what I do. So thank you, Bellesa, for taking care of me in more ways than one. Okay, riddle time. Just a quick riddle. I know you guys love them. I love them too. All right, today's riddle is, what is cut on a table but never eaten? All right, let's get started. Today's case is, it was suggested to me actually by a lovely subscriber. I didn't know about it until Sheldon Pawn 9141 brought it to my attention. And I was like, oh, BRB, going in the rabbit hole. And then I've been there ever since, like every day. Now, if I say the name Jan Arden, I feel like most Canadians would know who she is. She is a treasured Canadian singer. I'm very curious though, because I know that I don't have a lot of Canadian watchers. My primary audience is in the US and in UK as well. So I would love to hear in the comments if you guys know who Jan Arden is. But big deal in Canada. She's got like 40 singles off the top of my head. Like I've Got a Good Mother, great song. And then now like as we get into it, I know a little bit more about the background. It's super emotional. And like Insensitive. Anyways, yeah. Jan is literally in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame for a reason. But something that I didn't know until Sheldon Pawn 9141 brought to my attention was that the year she signed her first record deal was the same year her brother was charged with murder. And so I heard that, dove in the rabbit hole. I've been very confused down in the rabbit hole because I don't know if he did it. So I want to talk to you guys about it. And it's led me into a lot of different rabbit holes that I've kind of been in for a while, stewing in, trying to figure out how I want to move forward. So I appreciate your guys' suggestions on that when I get to that part at the end of the video. But let's get started. DeRay Bentley Richards, who is Jan Arden's brother, was born to parents Joan and Daryl Richards on March 27th, 1962 in Calgary, which is very close to me. He was the oldest child, with Jan being the middle, and then they had a younger brother named Patrick. A lot of the description of their upbringing I actually got from hearing Jan explain it herself, and she describes her childhood and the childhood of her brothers as very complicated. There were happy memories like playing hockey with her brothers, hunting for gophers, and like wandering on their family property in Springbank, Alberta. But she says, in her words, like it was not the Brady Bunch family. Her father was an alcoholic. He was quite volatile, very unpredictable, and it was so bad that the children never really brought friends home because they didn't know what to expect from him. Something that they learned from a very early age was just the best thing to do is stay out of his way. So they retreated to the basement a lot. It sounds like Jan and her younger brother kind of did that more, and DeRay was like the older, more protector maybe, and I think like more rebellious. But this in the basement it's so interesting to learn all of this. Is really where Jan learned to love music. At the age of 10, she would like sneak down there to just stay out of her dad's way, out of sight, out of mind. She wasn't going to get the brunt of any of his aggression. And in the basement, her brother DeRay had a record player, and I guess the family had a subscription to Columbia Record Club, and so every month a new record would come and she would just like put the record on and just escape everything that was going on upstairs and just retreat into a world of music. She taught herself how to play guitar on her mom's guitar and then started writing her own music, and she said she used it kind of like a diary. She explains that while she was escaping into this different world of hers, of much more peace, her brother was bearing the brunt of their father's alcoholism. And she said that he would always pick on DeRay, especially like as he got older, like 18, 19, 20. They would even get into physical altercations. And that led her brother to kind of go down the same path of just self-destruction. So he drank a lot. He started using a lot of different types of drugs. And they definitely went in different areas of life, Jan and DeRay. Obviously, since we're talking about it, the road for DeRay led to him being arrested and charged with first-degree murder of Carrie Marshall in December 1992, which is the same month that Jan Arden was signed to her first record deal. At this point, DeRay was not living in Alberta anymore. Carrie Marshall was born in Winnipeg on December 30th, 1970 to her father, Edward Marshall, and her mother, Fairy Louise Rasmussen. I thought her name was so beautiful, Fairy Louise. Fairy describes Carrie as a very warm, loving person. She was very close to her family, especially her younger sister. And that bond with the family became even closer when at the age of 16, Carrie got pregnant. She had a son named Brandon, which is not an easy thing to do at all, especially at that age, but she stepped up to the plate and raised him mostly on her own, and then also with the help and support of her family. So by the time Carrie was 21 and Brandon was 4, she was kind of looking for more of a security in terms of family, like a family unit, husband, wife, raising a child. And she started dating a guy named Stan Pollock, who she thought could be her partner in life. But Stan had some issues of his own. He allegedly was involved in the gang and drug world and had been physically abusive towards Carrie. Despite that, she saw something in him, and like a lot of young women in her situation who are very empathetic, loving, kind, and see the best in people, that's what she focused on and really thought that she could bring a side out of him that she could see, and she could help him and I guess fix him. I want to circle back really quickly here. Although Carrie was born in Winnipeg, her and her family were living in BC. So while she was going through this phase in her life and was with Stan, they were in BC, specifically in Cranbrook. But her plans to really help Stan get out of the lifestyle that he was had led her to packing up her son, herself, Stan, and moving the family to Tata Creek. The goal was for Stan to go there, get help, stay sober, and then hopefully just leave the whole drug gang life behind. My understanding is there wasn't just like this one big pack up and move. Carrie was going back and forth between Cranbrook and Creston, BC, which was kind of like in the middle go-to from Cranbrook and Chautau Creek. She was just tying up all the loose ends in Cranbrook, getting everything organized, packed. I believe Stan had already located himself to Chautau Creek. So at the beginning of December 1992, Carrie had just started the move from Cranbrook to Creston, and she had returned to Cranbrook to pick up the last little bit of her belongings. Carrie's mom said on the morning of December 3rd, 1992, she had dropped Carrie off at the Cranbrook Mall, which was also the bus depot for Carrie to catch a bus back to Creston, BC. She was going to stay at her little temporary home there. The digs that she was described as living in are like a shack, but I think it's like more like a tiny house outside of town. It was in a fairly wooded, remote area. So Carrie got on the bus, arrived in Creston on the afternoon of the 3rd, so same day as her mom had dropped her off. And when she got to the place that she was staying at, her friend Roselle Husford came to visit her at her tiny home. Her friend said that as she was pulling into, I guess, the law area of where Carrie was staying, she noticed that there were a couple of tire tracks that were in the snow. And Carrie didn't drive, so it was something that she had mentioned to Carrie, and Carrie looked at the tracks, and her friend said that she just kind of like cryptically was like, oh, well, somebody's been up here. And keep in mind that this is in a wooded, remote area, not just somewhere where someone's going to drive by and just turn around in the driveway and leave. That was pretty much the extent of the conversation about the tires. There was no speculation of who it could be. And her friend stayed for a little bit, just a couple hours. She said she left around 5 p.m. and that was the last time that anybody saw Carrie alive. The next morning, which is the 4th of December, the plan was for Carrie's stepdad, Mark, to come and pick her up to take her out to Chautau Creek officially. And he was coming at 9 a.m. He arrived at 9 a.m. as planned. And when he pulls into the lot, he notices that the front door, which he could see like from the end of the driveway, was halfway open. He just assumes in that second that, oh, okay, well, Carrie's probably just grabbing all of her things and bringing it to the front door because she knows that I'm coming. So he gets out, steps into the house, and because it's so small, like he instantly sees Carrie's not there, but her house keys are, her purse, and her cigarettes are still just sitting in the kitchen, which is a huge red flag for him because it's not like, you just pop over to the neighbor's house or go out quickly and you're going to be back. She's in an isolated area. Because she relied on her family and friends to drive her places, she was very quickly reported missing. And almost as quickly as she was reported missing, the RCMP honed in on now 33-year-old DeRay Richards, who had recently also moved to BC. He had moved from Alberta to Creston in August 1992, and he did this for a fresh start. Back in Calgary, he was not on a good path at all. He had been arrested several times. He was charged and convicted several times in connection with violent crimes against women. And in fact, he was serving an intermittent sentencing for threatening a woman in Alberta, which he was serving at the RCMP Creston Detachment Center, and he was doing that each weekend. So immediately, he's already known to local police. Learning about this and how different the paths that the two siblings had gone down was so interesting. Like I had no idea. So clearly, Jan, she was on a completely different point of her life. But DeRay was hopeful that Creston was going to be like a whole new shift for him. He quickly got a job at the local lumber yard. He found stable living with a roommate, and he was making friends in the area. After questioning him in regards to Carrie's disappearance, which he was adamant he had nothing to do with, he was temporarily held and his vehicle was seized for inspection before he was let go. Now, the following day after he was let go, Carrie was no longer a missing person. She was found dead. It was 3 days after she was reported missing. Her body was found about a 10-minute drive from the house that she was staying at, and she had just been left along the side of this quiet logging road. She was spread out on the ground. Her body was frozen and she was covered in a light layer of fresh snow. She was also undressed. The only thing that she was wearing was a single pink sock. It was actually several pieces of clothing, a t-shirt, a pair of pants, a bra, and another pink sock that were discarded along the road that had actually helped lead searchers to her body. During her autopsy, one of the main things that stood out was there didn't appear to be any signs of self-defense. Carrie had no broken fingernails. There was no bruising, no lacerations or anything like that on her hands or forearms. She did have several bruises to her face, which the medical examiner believed were consistent with punches that could have left her unconscious, so that could have been why she didn't appear to defend herself. Her autopsy also found several internal injuries, and according to the medical examiner, he believed that she bled to death, and the medical examiner as well as the Crown prosecutor believed that the likely murder weapon was a tire iron. That was the first autopsy. There were 2 autopsies performed, and then the second autopsy, that medical examiner also believed that she was likely unconscious when the injury that killed her was inflicted. And he also believed that there was no doubt that the murder was a sexual assault related death. So motivated by a sexual crime. This is something that we know DeRay Richards has already had issues with, and police soon find out in their investigations that DeRay and Carrie had met before. Allegedly, it was about a month or 2 after he arrived in town, and the 2 of them met at Carrie's friend named Cindy's house. Cindy said her and Carrie were hanging out, and DeRay had come by to drop off his truck before heading to jail to serve his time for the weekend. And while he was there, Cindy said that almost the entire time he just kind of kept his eyes on Carrie. That Monday, after serving his time on the weekend, Cindy said that he came back to her house, and this time he was intoxicated. He got there around midnight, and Cindy said at this point he was trying to strike up a conversation with Carrie, and he asked her if she wanted to go four-wheeling with him, and she said no. According to Cindy, DeRay said, "Oh, what's the matter? Are you scared to go for a ride with me, or are you scared I'm going to R-word you?" Carrie said, "No, that's not it." And DeRay replied, "Well, you should be." And Carrie then asks, "Are you saying that I should be afraid of you?" And then he said, "No, that's not what I meant." With that information, due to DeRay's past and investigators believing that Carrie's murder was sexually motivated, DeRay Richards was quickly charged with the first-degree murder of Carrie Marshall. A lot of the evidence that was brought to trial was circumstantial, but the Crown believed that just the compilation of it all pointed to the fact that DeRay was Carrie's killer. When police had seized DeRay's vehicle, it was a 1976 Ford Elite Torino, they said they found 2 drops of blood in the car. There was a DNA expert that determined that the blood had come from the same genotype as Carrie's, and that it was a 1 in 12 match. They also believed there were other ties to the crime and the vehicle The tires that were on the car were studded Uniroyal M&S Plus tires. Investigators say that they had found a pair of tire tracks in the snow just outside of the home that Carrie was staying at. And according to a witness who I guess kind of was perceived as an expert that testified, those impressions in the snow matched the tread pattern of DeRay's tires. Also within those tracks, it was believed that that vehicle had previously hit a red Western cedar telephone pole and had left like little specks of paint as it was like leaving the pattern. So there was like specks of paint within the snow in this tread. Police had found that DeRay's car had some damage on the right rear corner, and the paint matched the color that was found on the pole. Also under the bumper was this sliver of red Western cedar that was untreated. Another piece of evidence that was brought forward was an empty Lube motor oil container, and its cap was missing. This was found near the area of where Carrie's body was found, and according to court documents, Lube brand wasn't, very available in BC at the time, but there were containers of that specific oil that were found in DeRay's car, and a cap missing its container was found in his engine compartment. So they had found a container with no cap, and now there's a cap to the same brand in DeRay's vehicle. When it came to this vehicle itself, DeRay had purchased it about a month before Carrie's murder, and the man that he bought it from also testified at trial, and he said that when he sold the car to DeRay, there was a tire iron in the trunk. This is the suspected murder weapon. When the vehicle was seized, police said they did not find a tire iron in the car, though. Some other things that did not do DeRay any favors was that when he was initially arrested in connection with Carrie's disappearance at the time, he had made a call at the police station. He made it to a friend who was staying at his house and allegedly asked him to make sure that the jacket and the shoes that he had worn that day didn't go to police. I guess when he was rearrested later, he was wearing that jacket, and police said that they found black and red fibers on it that were consistent with those in a sweater of Carrie's. That sweater had been turned over to police several weeks after Carrie was murdered, and it was handed over by a woman named Maggie, who was a friend of DeRay's, and she said that DeRay had given it to her the day that Carrie disappeared. When Carrie's mom testified at trial, she said that that sweater was Carrie's and that it was actually the last sweater that she saw her wearing when she dropped her off at the bus station. The trial went on for 74 days, and after 16 hours of deliberation, DeRay Richards was convicted of first-degree murder on May 27, 1994. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. DeRay himself has said, based on all of the evidence that was presented, he agrees it does not look good for him, but day one has been adamant that he never killed Carrie. He says, "I knew her, but I hadn't seen her since the beginning of October 92, so 2 months prior to her murder." He also admits that his history of violence against women is nothing to be proud of, but again, he had nothing to do with Carrie's murder. Almost as soon as he was convicted, he started appeal processes as soon as he could. And he lost every one of them. It had pretty much gotten to the point where he had used up all of his appeals. DeRay Richards spent 25 years in prison for the murder of Carrie Marshall, and it was then the support of U of BC's Innocent Project asking the federal justice minister to take another look at his case that gave him some hope. They ended up filing a 267-page submission to the justice minister claiming that DeRay was the victim of a miscarriage of justice and believed that he was innocent. A lot of the work that the lawyer Brock Martlin and students of the U of BC Innocence Project did was pro bono. I'm assuming that one of the main questions that the lawyer got was like, is Jan Arden funding or helping or whatever? And he's actually stated in interviews that she had put a lot of resources into private detectives and stuff, private investigators and stuff for Duray's case. But when it came to like legal fees and stuff like that, no, that they had been doing a lot of the work just on their own and were able to get some aid, like legal aid funding. A bulk of their case is just showing that, yes, okay, a lot of this evidence that was presented doesn't look good, but it's kind of, I think the terminology that they used was, it was threads that were like woven together to make it look like a piece of, you know, sturdy fabric. But then when you started pulling on it, everything just kind of unraveled. And that Duray, due to his past and his being known to police and how they perceived him, was just kind of targeted for a quick resolution in the case. In fact, something that's really interesting is at this time, there was this, and I still believe, this is something that I was mentioning at the beginning, I still believe that there is a serial killer in Alberta. I believe that there's a serial killer that lives very close to me, actually. I would love suggestions on how to like get to the bottom of it. Anyways, but this started around this time in the early 90s, and investigators almost were kind of trying to put it on Duray. They were like, okay, like this is the guy, because he came from Alberta where all of this is happening. Now he's moved to BC, and we've got a Creston woman that he's met that's murdered, and he had met her. Because of this perception that he could possibly be this serial killer, the new lawyers on his case had just basically stated that this was a classic case of tunnel vision. Through looking at the old court documents, they found that there was a lot of flaws. They said there was pseudoscience, witnesses that were hypnotized, that's not very, reliable, faulty DNA, and then one of the witnesses being a jailhouse informant who was given a lot more credibility than they should have been. Starting with the container, the Looby Lube container. I guess when this container was found, it was like very flattened and worn. It had been missing the sticker that was put on by the company on all of the containers like 2 years prior to the murder. So Duray's new lawyers suggested that this container was probably there for quite some time, and with Duray being relatively new to the area, the likelihood of it coming from him specifically was not very likely. What I found very interesting was the testimony that was given about the tires. So in the original trial, there was the testimony from, I guess it was perceived as like somebody who's an expert in tires, saying that the tread matched Duray's tires. It turns out that witness was an employee of the Big O tire shop. He was the one who put the tires on Duray's vehicle. He was also Duray's roommate, and he had been hypnotized before testifying. It wasn't until the UBC students looked into that further that they discovered that the distance between the tire marks outside of the home that Carrie was staying out at measured 1.9 meters, but the distance between the center line of Duray's tires measured only 1.6 meters. And when we're talking about that, like especially when it comes to vehicles, like that's a significant difference. So no, this little fella was no tire expert, especially with like the treads and stuff like that. Nowadays, we see so much more accurate studies on that and actual experts who spend years and years and years just dialing into all of those key details. Being an employee and a roommate being the one to put it on, saying it kind of looked like it, and then being hypnotized, it's not like, it's not solid evidence. There's so many flaws with somebody being hypnotized. I know I've seen cases where it's actually helped witnesses remember things, but there's also the argument that it can distort your memory. You can also just have like a hallucinate, like a created hallucination when it actually didn't happen. So the memory itself is actually not even real. It's a false memory. Also, the DNA testing that said that it had matched drops of blood found in DeRay's vehicle to Carrie, it's nothing close to what we use in today's testing, which is like 100% accurate. And I believe that this testing, with it being like 80%, this was the only time that it was used in a conviction in Canada was in DeRay's case. The sweater is something that I really struggle with because there is the friend that testified that DeRay had given this sweater that allegedly belonged to Carrie to her the day that Carrie went missing, and she was seen wearing this sweater the day before she went missing. There are arguments that the story about how she came to have this sweater, the story of how that happened has changed. But to me, I feel like it's really telling, like if that was Carrie's sweater, her friends and family say that was definitely her sweater, and now it's in possession of somebody who knew DeRay, and he's saying that he hadn't seen her since October. Like the sweater I can't get around. That being said, this is where I kind of like go back and forth from like, is he responsible? Is he not responsible? Among the evidence, there was 183 human hairs that were collected from Carrie's body, including pubic hair. And according to the police laboratory, none of the hair samples matched DeRay. Unfortunately, those samples were not tested further. And DeRay's Innocent Project's team has basically brought up the fact that the second that evidence like that, which is very telling. I mean, when you have hair samples like DNA like that, especially in today's advancements of technology, that's huge in ruling out people. But when they weren't able to match it, all of a sudden the evidence became irrelevant. It was just kind of like, oh, we're not going to look any further there because it doesn't fit our narrative. Very frustrating to learn that those hairs can no longer be tested. All of the evidence pertaining to DeRay's case, Carrie's case, was burned in a sawmill by police in February 2003. This allegedly was part of like a routine destruction procedure. And this whole process doesn't really sit well with me because at the time, it wasn't destroyed yet. So DeRay had put in a request for access to his files and evidence and stuff like that to support his appeal process. When DeRay put in that request for access to evidence and his file, at that time, the evidence was still available. So there's records showing that this request was put in, the evidence was still available, and then it shows that the exhibits were sent to Ottawa to be examined further. They were then returned back to BC and given authorization for destruction instead of giving it to DeRay's team. At the point of this happening, he had almost been in jail for 25 years, and this he believed would have been crucial to his innocence, and one of the biggest supporting factors that would have been able to officially clear his name. When I was reading about that, it made me think of the West Memphis 3 case where Damien Eccles has never wavered from innocence and been like, you know, I get it. You don't need to take my word for it. I've said a lot of things that are not okay, but this is something that is solid, reliable, you know, DNA, reliable, you don't have to take my word for it. I want to test this so that science can back me up and help prove that I'm innocent, which is essentially what DeRay was wanting. He has said that, during all of these years in prison, missing out so much on his family, seeing his kids grow up, the death of his father, his grandparents, his mother suffering from Alzheimer's. He's been robbed of that, but he also says that what's equally as crippling of, his life being essentially robbed from him is that Carrie's family believes that he is the one that killed their daughter. And that's a big part of what he also wants to clear. Like he doesn't want her family believing that he's the one that did it. And that's something that it kind of makes me hesitate covering some of these cases, because I am very, very aware that there is a victim's whole family and their feelings behind all of this. If he's innocent, though, that doesn't give them proper justice, that doesn't give Carrie proper justice. And it does happen. People are wrongfully convicted all of the time. I am so frustrated hearing about the fact that some crucial evidence, like 183 samples to go through, could support DeRay's claims that he's innocent. But it also, it doesn't ease the pain that the family is going through, and doesn't invalidate those feelings of feeling like this is the person responsible for taking their loved one. Carrie's mother through the years shared how painful it is to constantly be going through reliving everything, especially since DeRay has been appealing pretty much since the beginning. So it's just always, you can never really heal from it. It's just constantly continuing on and on. They're re-traumatized essentially every time that there is an appeal, and that they have to go over everything and live through what happened to Carrie again. DeRay, from what I know, spent most of his sentence in the Bowden Institution in Alberta, which is not far from me. And throughout all of those years, I guess Jan would go and visit her brother regularly. And in interviews, she herself has also said, I make no light of his past. He doesn't. And in some ways, it sounds like he's almost grateful for being arrested when he was, and has said to Jen, like, I really don't know what would have happened if I wasn't. I was on such like an angry path, and specifically with females, he was very angry. And it sounds like it was almost like viewing them as people who were vulnerable that he could overpower, and perhaps that stemming from dealing with what he dealt with his father. Not making excuses at all, but this is just relaying the information. That's what it sounds like. And he says to Jan, like, I don't know what I would have done to myself had I just continued on that path and not just been like halted, stopped in my tracks. A lot of her advocacy for, I guess, him hasn't even really been so much of injustice or him saying that he's innocent, which she definitely has said, but it's being an advocate for him and others that are their living conditions in prison. She's basically said, I've watched him just slowly die for the last 20 years. He's only 3 years older than her, but she sees like just his health completely declining. He had type 1 diabetes, respiratory issues, sores on his body that won't heal, teeth that are just like rotting out of him. He could barely see, and it was alarming for her. It's something that she wasn't aware of and just didn't even expect. Like from Canada, you think like, oh, okay, you live in Canada. Like it's, of course you're in jail. It's not going to be like cushy, but she was alarmed at the conditions that he was living in. And another thing that she brought up was, again, the question about like, okay, you're Jan Arden. He's got to be living like a cushy life in there. And she said, people think I send him money all the time. And that's, couldn't be further from the truth. She said, even if I wanted to send him a lot of money, he is only allowed $500 a year. That's all he can have. So even if he had tens of millions of dollars, I couldn't give that to him and make anything different for him. Now in 2019, he was granted day parole to primarily visit at that point his mom, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. The parole board looked at his file, believed that he had made a lot of progress in his life in the 25 years that he had been behind bars. They mentioned that he had a positive work ethic. He also had huge support from his family and believed that he was a good candidate for like gradual reintegration. From what I could tell, I believe that DeRay is reintegrated into society in Alberta. I think like close to your gal. He has an Instagram. I checked in on it. It seems very wholesome, which is also it adds to the confusion of this whole case. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, can we just rewind and go back to the DNA? Let's go back to the DNA. Why was it destroyed? It just makes no sense to me. There's no other way about it. If you could test something that was going to give you like the answers you needed, especially as an investigator, to be like, yeah, okay, we believe so strongly that you are the one that did this, that yeah, let's test it. Let's test it for you and just put that nail in your coffin. Why destroy it? It's so frustrating. I believe that it does go back to the argument that his lawyer had, where there was like the whole tunnel vision. Something that I came across when I was researching this case was that when word had spread between like, you know, different departments and agencies about his arrest, there were other investigators, I think in Alberta, that came to question DeRay about other unsolved murders. Specifically at the time was a murder of a young woman named Tracy Maunder, who was killed in 1992. And that just kind of didn't go anywhere with DeRay. It was like, oh, okay, like if we can tie him to this, no question he's involved in a bunch of unsolved murders, and surely with Carrie. But I came across two writers who are investigating a man named Luke Gregoire. One of them, his name is John Alori. He's actually the brother of a murder victim, and he is writing with a crime writer named Patricia Pearson. Gosh, I just suck sometimes. There's a whole story there. I guess they had like dated once, and then they were apart, and then they like not rekindled, but just he had reached out to her because she was a crime writer, and he's like, hey, do you think there's more to my sister's death, which was deemed like a drug overdose, but he thought it was more, ended up she was murdered. Anyways, it was a whole thing. They think that it's Luke that is the man that is responsible. The book is called Wish You Were Here, A Murdered Girl, A Brother's Quest, and the Hunt for a Serial Killer. And so they dive into the connection between John's sister, who was murdered outside of Sherbrooke, Quebec, which is also where I have family. There's a lot of ties to all of this. Very, very eerie researching this week for me. And now this is why I'm still in the rabbit hole, because this stems like so much further than Carrie's case. There was no connection between DeRay and Tracy. There obviously was one between him and Carrie, which I believe is obviously why he was convicted and spent 25 years in jail. There's a lot of people on my radar, though. There is one that, like I said at the beginning, I feel lives very close to me, like a serial killer. I think that this person could possibly be responsible for the murder of Amber Tuckrow. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still in the rabbit hole, you guys, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on all of this. I mean, also just like keeping sensitivity in mind here. I did wonder about Stan, who was Carrie's boyfriend, who had issues of his own, being involved in the drug trade, gang life, who was reportedly physically abusive to Carrie. From what I understand, he was already in Tata Creek. That's not to say that maybe somebody he knew could be responsible, but there's no way of following up and questioning him because he was also murdered after Carrie's murder. Something eerie about his murder, though, is that he was also left in a bush by members of a gang in 2005. So I feel like that's a little bit unsettling because, as we know, Carrie was also found just like off a logging road, like in a bushed area. So I don't know. I'm all over the place, you guys. Do I think DeRay is responsible? I don't know. I really don't know. I feel like that evidence that was just destroyed would have been really telling. I obviously mentioned I can't get past the whole sweater thing. I'd love to know more about it. I looked, I could not, like, I really couldn't find anything about the sweater. And I don't know if it's like my ADD or what, but I just like get hyper focused on things. I'm like, hey, but what about the sweater? This is why I would not be like a really good lawyer, because you have to kind of look at a lot of evidence and weigh out, I guess, what you can focus on, what you can't. And I can't get past the sweater at all. So yeah, stay tuned for, I don't know, my quest to become a solver of a serial killer. Solver? I don't know. I've been in the rabbit hole for too long, you guys. I have to go. I am very curious to hear your thoughts, though. I feel like, I don't know, whenever I cover these types of cases, I love hearing your guys's theories, because you even like, you're your own detective, so you have names, and maybe you're also thinking the same things that I'm thinking, and have compiled some of your own thoughts and evidence. Like, we're all internet detectives here, and take the job really seriously. So very curious to hear your guys' thoughts and your suggestions of how I should move forward for taking down a serial killer. That is it for me today. Answer to today's riddle. Quick refresher. What is cut on a table but is never eaten? And the answer is a deck of cards. That reminds me of my dad, because he does magic. I know that sounds so funny, like he's a magician. Not like professionally, he should be. He's really good at it. But anyways, okay. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.